right, we're going to get started in just about a minute. Glad to see everybody who's here. I know at least one person. It's good to see you, Matt. We're going to start on our very first live stream here on the This, That, and Theology channel. Trying a lot of new tech, so if things don't work as we're trying to get all of this done, be sure to let me know because I'm still trying to figure it out myself. It is Friday, the 9th of February. We're going to do our live stream again. We're going to get right on. We have a lot to do today. A lot of things we're going to talk about, including my picks for best of 2023. This is mainly just films. We'll talk a little bit about video games and some of the things that I found to be pretty exciting about video games, but that'll of course come in just a little bit. We are using StreamYard is our streaming platform. Thank you to Think Media for letting me know about that system. Very helpful in being able to show you some of the slides as we're also kind of talking through. But yeah, so welcome, Matt. Glad to see that you're here with us this morning. And I'm not surprised that this could be a small group, but again, I know a lot of you will also be joining us later on where you won't be necessarily joining us live. So thank you for watching for that as well. We started This, That, and Theology just a little under a year ago. And when we did that, the idea was we're looking for a way of communicating to people how you can see your worldview in the world around you, particularly when it came to the media and the entertainment that we're consuming. And so we started with movie reviews. The very first one we did was the Super Mario Brothers movie that came out all the way back in March of last year. Hard to believe that it was that long ago, but yeah, all the way back then. And so we've been going strong. We took January off. So if you are subscribed to our channel and you notice that we didn't have any videos during January, a lot of that was kind of rethinking how are we doing the channel? What do we need to do differently? Is there something that could be more effective? And that is part of why we are now streaming this morning. I'm hoping to do this about once a week. We're going to try to shoot for every Fridays at 10, as long as we are able to get things done. We'll talk about some of what we've been reading about in our Bibles through this week, if you're doing the Bible in 1 year plan, and we'll talk about that. Also talk about what I'm watching and playing this week. And I'm very excited about something that dropped this week, and I can't wait to talk about that. It's not very spiritual, but very exciting. And then we'll talk today. We're going to talk about the videos again, the movies that I think are some of the best, some of the most disappointing, and some that are just worth your consideration as we look at what you're going to be spending your time on the year ahead. Of course, now most of those videos and those movies are now available for streaming, so you can watch those at home. You're not spending necessarily your theater dollars on some of those, but we are going to talk again a little about some things that are upcoming. We'll talk a little bit about some of the Disney films that are now being re-released out into theaters, and so that'll happen coming up soon. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the This, That, and Theology live stream. If you're watching it in retrospect, we're glad that you decided to take the time. We will put timestamps after this video stream is concluded, so that if you want to jump ahead to any one section, you're able to do that really quickly. Yeah, so we have a lot to talk about today. The first thing I want to talk about is the 1 year Bible program. So a lot of us are trying to find ways of reading our Bible throughout the year, and we talk about having a biblical worldview here at the channel. The best way to do that is actually to be spending time in our Bibles. And so if you are reading in the OneYearBible online plan, which is a free year-long Bible reading plan, you'll notice that these are the verses for this week that we studied. We were in Exodus from chapter 17 all the way through chapter 30. So that's a pretty big chunk of the book of Exodus. We're in the book of Matthew from Matthew 22 to 26 and Psalms 27 through 31. And then again, those verses in Proverbs that you see there. Because today's is a little bit longer topic. We're not going to go through all of these passages, but I did want to talk as we look at 1 year in the Bible. Very often we do those readings and we're going so fast that we don't necessarily take time to stop and sit and realize just what these verses actually mean. Why do the verses that show up in our readings, for instance, from Exodus, why are they something that should apply to our lives today? And one of the things, especially in Exodus in the Old Testament, I wanted to take a look at was that um, in the book of Exodus, we see that God is telling his people that they need to be distinct, that they're different from the rest of the world. And so as we're looking at some of those things, one of the things he did was he gave us those 10 commandments. And as you look in Exodus chapter 20, you go through there and you see all of these commands that talk about how God's people are supposed to be distinct. Now, whether or not you believe that those laws are only applying to Israel or if they still have relevance to us today, we do know that if you are a Christian, if you are a follower of God, and you are one of God's people, we are called to live a distinct life. The way that those ceremonial laws, the rules, and things like the Ten Commandments, all of those things were given in a way so that God's people were distinct from the world around them. And so, as we look at our lives, as we try to see how does Exodus, especially Exodus 20 and that section, and starting really in Exodus 21, 22, all the way through Exodus 30, it gets really interesting in the next couple of chapters. But as we're looking up through Exodus 21 through 23, 24, all the way up to 30, we see all these laws about how they're supposed to worship. The big deal is that we are supposed to be distinct from the world around us. We're not supposed to look exactly like the rest of the world, even in the way that we worship. And so the question you have to ask as you're looking at your week and how you're doing things is, are you living a life that is distinct? Are you living a life that is not the same as the rest of the world? So that has applications to how we're watching movies, how what video games we're playing. It has to do with what books we're reading, or that we're saying, "Yeah, I'm reading this book." I've had a couple conversations in the last week about one of my favorite musicals, and I've even been a little convicted on it because I'm having to ask the question, is this really something that I should be advocating, because it's not pleasant in its topic. It deals with murder and death and all of those subjects. Are those things that I enjoy then still reflecting what it means to be a different person, a chosen person of God, a follower of Christ? And so, as we're looking at worldview in the world around us, Exodus is an absolutely essential thing because we are going to be different. We are going to be a distinct people. So that's our first thing there, our first element there. Um, we need to be a distinct people. We need to be separate and distinct. So we're going to do that again next week. We'll be looking. We'll probably spend a little extra time looking at some of the other passages for next week. And of course, if there is something that you're like, hey, I would really like to see this, I'll be checking the comments before we do next week. So if there's a passage in your Bible reading from this coming week, let me know. And also go to I put the website up there. I'll go ahead and put that screen back up again. If you go to OneYearBibleOnline.com, they have several different plans. This is the one that I'm using for this purpose. That's a great way. It takes 5-10 minutes a day just to be in the Word. There's a lot of buffer that you can have that gives you a way of seeing. If you miss a day, it's not the end of the world. But we'll talk about your reading every week so that you know that it's not just things we're reading to just fill our brains, but it's actually something that has an impact in our life. Well, the main topic for today is, of course, the best of 2023. I actually tried to record this video maybe 2 or 3 times, and there's always something that caused a problem. I think the last time I recorded it, the focus on my camera was so bad you couldn't actually tell where I was. And of course, if you're looking here, this is not my studio. I'm trying things out with a new green screen setup to see if that actually works. So this is our virtual campus here, you could say, virtual studio, which is helping with some of those focus issues. That also lets me kind of look at the screen and be able to pull things up. Um, but that's all beside the point. We're going to talk about my picks for the best of 2023. And I do have some criteria as to what I was using to choose, because some of these films are not necessarily my favorite films. They're not necessarily the movies that I said, yeah, that was awesome. I can't wait to watch it again. Of course, some of those did make it to there. but I used three categories that I thought were helpful in choosing, at least for this, that, and theology, what our top movies would be. And that kind of spells out the word ace. I was looking for something that was appropriate. There were some films that I was really looking forward to that I didn't ever review because the content that was in that film was just inappropriate. If one of my kids had to walk in and I was watching it at home, it would is something that I quickly try to turn off the television. Are there some things that I just said, you know what? Even though I want to see this movie, it's not appropriate. I'm thinking mainly of movies like Oppenheimer. I often would check the plugged in online. This is a ministry from Focus on the Family. I checked on there first to see what kind of things might be in the film. That doesn't necessarily disqualify it from me seeing and reviewing it because I do want to equip you all to have the tools you need to make your own decisions about these things. But if it's going to make the best list, it's got to be mostly appropriate. I also wanted to make sure that the films that we're talking about are worth talking about. It's one thing if you're going to be going to see a film that is maybe interesting or appropriate, but if there's nothing to talk about, I'm not necessarily going to put it on this list. And finally, it needed to be entertaining. Nobody likes going and watching a boring movie. Well, maybe some of you do, and I will certainly admit that I have put on films with the express purpose of falling asleep to them. Just as white noise, those films aren't going to make this list. So that is our list for the best of 2023, and we'll go ahead and get started. Our first category of films that we're looking at is animated film. And so a lot of times, kind of who I've seen has been tuning into the channel have been people who are looking for how to guide with their families. And especially if you have families with kids that are maybe older elementary, animated films are still fun. I grew up in a large family. We watched lots of animated movies. So I've always got a special place in my heart for them. And my top pick is actually the very first movie that we reviewed here, and that's the Super Mario Brothers movie. I thought that movie was absolutely a blast. I enjoyed the film. It was clean. There were things to talk about heroism. It was great to see Peach as a hero figure, but still, being Peach, still being feminine. There were no social issues I had to be concerned with, and it really showed that you don't have to be a part of one of these existing franchises or the Disney film. In fact, this was the first film that really showed, yeah, Disney does not have the market on animated films anymore. And of course, that's something we can talk about later. This is the first review that we did on the channel. So if you're looking through our film reviews on This, That, and Theology YouTube channel, which you're watching right now, you can find that review. It's about 5 minutes long. And that was, I was one of those things where I was watching a seminar from Think Media, and they said, you just got to press record. And I said, okay. And so I reviewed this film. But even with all of that, it's still probably my top pick for the year as far as animated films. We have a couple honorable mentions in this category, and it surprised me, and that's the movie Leo. Leo was released on Netflix only. It's a was direct to streaming. It stars Adam Sandler. It's from his production company. There's certainly some Adam Sandler humor in it, so there's some bathroom humor, but it's not too bad. But it has some good things. Again, we want it to be appropriate. There's nothing grossly inappropriate in what's being presented here. It needs to have conversations. All the interactions Leo has with the kids really springboard you into having some conversations with your kids about all of those different issues. If you haven't seen it, I won't spoil the story for you, but it's definitely a must see film from the year. Um, pardon me. And so yeah, it came out in November. Excellent direct to stream film. I highly encourage you to go ahead and check that out if you haven't seen it. Now I do have a third category in each of these things. I'll have my choice for the best, an honorable mention, but also films that are just frankly disappointing. And I actually have two films in this category that I was actually looking forward to and were uh, quite disappointed. The first is Disney's Wish. And I know Disney has gotten a lot of flack over the last year. If you see my review, it was the first time I did put one of these kind of titles in front of my review because I was really surprised at how uncomfortable the whole film made me feel. I'm a huge Disney fan. If you look around my office, well, not the virtual one, but if you look around my office, you'll see Disney memorabilia around. We love going to the parks. We love spending time, and I love the films. When I was growing up, you knew a Disney film was generally something that you could watch without having to really worry about the content that was going to be in it. And unfortunately, when we got to Disney's Wish, instead of being this great film that really just uh, remembered and celebrated a history of Disney films, it felt a little checked in for on the one thing, and the other another part is I actually felt a little assaulted in the worldview that's being presented there. As a believer, as a Christian, I felt that some of the plot elements hit just a little too close to home as far as what it meant to be a follower of Christ. And then again, what they were saying was a really negative thing. The second film in this category that I was really surprised at that looked a lot of fun, looked well animated, looked like it was going to be a lot of enjoyable, exciting fun was a film called Nimona. And I had no idea what Nimona was when I went into it. It didn't have any kind of labeling that would have tipped me off to the fact that this is an absolutely full blown LGBTQ uh, advocacy. It's promoting of that lifestyle and that worldview. And my biggest issue and biggest disappointment was that it wasn't labeled like that. If you knew that's what you were getting into and you were going to be watching that film and that was the issue, then okay, it's at least well labeled in that way. But instead, it really felt like it kind of caught you off guard. Like it was a film that you didn't know going into it that it was going to be that kind of advocacy, that kind of promotional material, uh, especially for the transgender issues. And if you're trying to introduce your kids to these things in a controlled manner so that you can help them understand what it means to see this in the world or even work through some of those issues. I feel like broadsiding them with something that's listed in the kids section of the Netflix queues is just something that's unfortunately very, very frustrating. My next category of films, as we're talking, is the true-ish stories. I love films that have some connection to real life events. And this summer, one that I was really looking forward to because it not only connected real stories and true events, but also connected us to video games, was a film by the name of Gran Turismo. I'm sure some of you saw this film. I thought it was a blast. I really enjoyed it. In fact, I was surprised at how much I enjoyed the film. Just trying to figure out which screen I was using there. It's a lot of fun. It's got high octane racing. If you saw it in the theaters and with a good sound system, I mean, the whole thing rumbled as they're racing around those tracks. There's a lot to talk about what it means to persevere and about pursuing your dreams. One of the things in this film that was really interesting is that I identified more with the father than I did with the actual racer. Because as a parent, you see your kids have these great dreams, you want them to pursue them, but you also want them to have a little bit of a dose of realism. And in Gran Turismo, it's really one of those things where the main character, the driver, has a dream that doesn't seem like there's any way possible for him to actually achieve that dream, and yet he does through a program that actually did exist. This is one of the main reasons this is called a true-ish category, though, because there were a lot of details that were changed to make it more Hollywood. If you're interested in the true story, there's also documentaries about the main character that you can see there as well. I have two honorable mentions in this category. The first one is Sound of Freedom. Sound of Freedom was a film that came out over the summer. It was kind of a closet hit. It came out of nowhere. A lot of people watched it. This one doesn't quite get the top list because when you talk about entertaining, this film is not necessarily entertaining. It's a good one to have for conversation as you deal with human trafficking, which is a real problem in the world, but we also don't want to spend too much time focusing on it. Some of it is a little sensationalized. A lot of it is true and part of the original story, but you do have to deal with some of the issues, not with the story itself, but with the lead actor. The lead actor has been a proponent of some QAnon things, some conspiracy theories. And so that kind of detracted from being able to fully enjoy that film. But it was one of those movies that I actually really said everyone needs to see this film. I do really believe that this is one of those films I think we all need to see. We need to think about. We need to have conversations with. The most of the people that are being trafficked in this story are children, very young children. But human trafficking is a problem throughout, no matter what ages they are. And so it's good to springboard conversations with your kids about some of the dangers and how to be safe. So while it wasn't necessarily the most entertaining, it was something that I think everybody should spend some time to see. The second one was Boys in the Boat. And I didn't have a chance to review this one last year. It came out on Christmas Day. I think I saw it the day after. It's a little bit more subdued. It's not incredibly exciting and entertaining. This is not an adrenaline pumping movie by any case, but it is good to have a film like Boys in the Boat. Again, a true story, and this one follows pretty accurately. They do change some of the relationships in the main characters, just actually slowing them down. The main character, I believe, was already married by the time he was in college and going off to go to the Berlin Olympics. But great story. Really deals with some issues about class and funding, because one of the sensational parts of this story was that the rowing team was not from an Ivy League school with lots of funding. This was a school of mainly working class people. There's a really telling scene in the beginning of the film where the main character is putting newspapers in his shoes because he doesn't even have money to buy a new pair of shoes. He's trying to get a degree in engineering, and rowing wasn't a passion of his. It was a way that he could pay for college, and so that kind of launches the story of a group of kids who didn't grow up in boats, but work hard and really pursue well. And it's a based on a true story. It's well worth going to see, especially if you can catch it on streaming. So I don't even know if it's quite out yet, but yeah. There were a couple of disappointments in this category. The biggest, which I've already alluded to, was Oppenheimer. Um, I was really looking forward to this film. I remember seeing when I was younger, a Fat Man and Little Boy. It's telling the same story following Oppenheimer and the development of nuclear weapons and the Manhattan Project. And so I was looking forward to see a modern take on it. Christopher Nolan is probably one of the great filmmakers of the age, and I just couldn't wait to see what they were going to do with it. I had seen some of the behind the scenes and how they were doing some of the special effects with practical effects, not actually blowing off nuclear bombs, but creating some of those effects. And I said, this is going to be great. But I looked at Plugged In. I looked at some of the other reviews before I went to go see it. I was all set to do Barbenheimer. I was going to go see Barbie and then Oppenheimer right after. And just because of the content that is in there, I didn't feel comfortable walking into a movie theater. I was one of those, I didn't, knowing what was in the content of the film, I didn't feel I could even be seen going in to see it, even as a reviewer, even wearing a name tag that said, hey, I'm here to review the film. I just couldn't with the explicit nudity. I just felt like I couldn't do it. And that alone meant that was a disappointment. I still haven't seen it. And that's what makes it statement um, of this the summer movie season, to be sure, because I really was looking forward to that film. Our next group is something I call family movie night. This is something that is generally acceptable for most of your family, especially if you have a combination of younger or older elementary kids and high schoolers. So these are films that I was, in fact, my top pick really surprised me because I didn't think it was going to be a film that I would be excited about. I kind of walked into the movie theater going, well, I probably should see it. There's a lot of hype over it, so it would probably be a good idea if I had, review it. And that movie was Wonka, and I was really surprised. I'm a huge fan of the original movie, not the Johnny Depp remake in the mid 2000 aughts, but the original one with Gene Wilder as Willy Wonka, and Pure Imagination, still one of my all-time favorite songs. I've seen videos talking about how it's one of the greatest film songs ever written. I don't know if it goes that far, but I didn't even know it was a musical when I walked in to see Willy Wonka or the new Wonka film. I liked it so much, I came home raving about it to the kids. In my review on our website, I said, "You won't be humming those songs," but I was whistling the main theme. I was singing it for days. The kids went and saw it. I think some of them even saw it more than once, and it's great. My kids are from are all of my kids are teenagers at this point, from young teenagers to off in college, and they all love the movie. It was a lot of fun. The songs are catchy. It has some good things to talk about, and again, conversation is one of those top things. It's entertaining and it's appropriate. There's nothing in there that I felt squeamish about showing my kids. In fact, my kids went and saw it on their own at one point because, again, this blew me away at just how good of a movie it was, and I can't wait to see it again as soon as it comes out and streaming, whether I watch it with the kids or not. It's one of those films where I enjoyed it enough that I can't wait to see it yet one more time. A couple of honorable mentions in this group. Actually, there's only one honorable mention, and the only reason this film isn't on the top or tied for the top is because you really have to be a comic book fan to get the film, and that's the Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse movie. A couple years ago, the first one came out, and it was neat and edgy. It actually changed the way animation has been done for much of the animated world. Um, in fact, Wish, some people have criticized Wish because it copied the style of the new Spider-Man films. But again, there's not a whole lot of things that are controversial in this. There are a couple of things that are in the background that a couple weeks after the film came out, people were starting to talk about Gwen Stacy and whether or not she was trans or not. And those things aren't really there. And if your kids are in public school at all, they're having to deal with those kinds of materials. It's worth being it's worth having a conversation with your kids as you see those things in things like Spider-Man. But the film, the biggest problem I had with the film is you had to be a fan of Spider-Man because there were literally hundreds of references to non-mainstream Spider-Man stories, and if you didn't know them already, you kind of got lost in it. So, yeah, a lot of fun, it's good, engaging, but again, it may not be for everyone. Now, the next film on this is my disappointment, and my disappointment for this category uh, may surprise some of you because if you saw my review of this film, I actually liked the film. I thought it was kind of smart, a little edgy, but not too edgy, making some good social commentary. My biggest problem is that it was geared towards children, and it was not a children's movie, and that's Barbie. Again, I did see half of Barbenheimer. I saw Barbie in films, and I was surprised at just how smart and quick the film was. It had a lot to say. There's a lot of conversation starters. If you have older kids, this might be appropriate, but it's not a kid's film. It's about a kid's toy, but it is not a kid's film, and it makes some references that even made me uncomfortable. And I felt really uncomfortable when I was in the theater because there were, 6 and 7-year-old little girls in there all excited to see a movie about Barbie come to life. And it really isn't about a toy. It's about identity, who we are, how we fit in the world. And so that was the big disappointment. Not because I think it's categorically a bad film, but it's badly marketed because it is not for kids. This is not a kids movie, and so that's why that was my disappointment. I have one more category, and that is a category for older teens. Where your older teens, that all depends on your own family. I have teens who are older who have no interest in some of the films that would be in this category. My 13-year-old, he would love to see some of these films. For instance, we just now started watching the Marvel films with him, even though he is 13, and that's because you, as a parent, need to make the choice of when a lot of these films are appropriate for you to see with your kids, and so that's where this category. That's where this category kind of exists. And so this is the best of film for older teens. Actually, is a Marvel film, and it's probably the only Marvel film of this year that was really worth seeing, and that's Guardians of the Galaxy. I was surprised at how deep the story actually went. Lots of things to talk about that were in that story, dealing with animal abuse, experimentation, questions of what it means to be a family. Just one of those films that has so much to talk about after you're done watching it, but it is violent and there is some language. In fact, my biggest disappointment out of this film wasn't the violence, wasn't the action. It was the fact that Chris Pratt, who claims to be a believer, was very excited that he got to drop the first F bomb in a Marvel film. And that was so disappointing to see somebody who we had hoped would be a kind of a beacon of what it could be to be a Christian in Hollywood entertainment, and instead he's very excited about using very crass language in a film. So I don't know what that means for the rest of the Marvel franchise, but that is one consideration. Even though I really enjoyed the film, and I did put it at the best list, that is a big concern you have to do. As far as honorable mentions in this category, there actually were several films that could fit there. I loved the new Hunger Games film. I'm a big fan of the Hunger Games books and movies in general. I It's one of those books and movie films that I come back over and over and over again, just because of some of the themes that are in there about society. In most books, you look to see who is the person who changes. That's who the story is about. And you read Hunger Games, and nothing there changes. And so, what does that mean as part of that storytelling arc? The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, as a prequel, addresses a lot of those same issues in a new and fresh way. I'm not a big fan of the main female actor and some of the things that she has said and done, but she does a great job. The music is fantastic. It's really engaging, and so this is one of my honorable mentions for this category. Second one on this is Little Mermaid, and that is also a little surprising. It was surprising for me, even as I was saying, I really should talk about this one. Um, One of the things I enjoy about musical theater and the genre of musical theater is the ability to use songs and to tell you what's going on in your inner voice. One of my kids loves Little Mermaid, is a huge fan, but one of the things that always troubled me about Little Mermaid is that she makes these huge sacrifices to get what she wants, and she never really seems to count the cost. And because they expanded the storytelling in Little Mermaid to include a lot of inner dialogue, we got to see what Ariel was thinking when she realized, hey, this actually cost something. This actually uh, cost me in giving up my voice in order to be human. And that song alone made this one of my favorite films, and probably it's not my favorite Disney remake. That definitely is Cinderella. I think they really did a fantastic job on Cinderella there, but um, I still think that this one should be worth seeing. It's not flawless. It has some pretty significant things that just make me go, "Oh, why did you have to do that?" Um, but in general, I did enjoy it, and I think it's worth seeing. And the lead actress who plays Ariel in this has incredible set of pipes. She really did a good job of portraying Ariel. And there is a moment where the original voice of Ariel, it kind of hands off some food, and it's a pretty clear endorsement of you're doing a great job. It's great. It's a fun film. In this category, there were it was a whole category of films that was disappointing, and even though I put a Marvel movie in that last category, in this category, and I put a Disney remake in this category. Most of the stuff that came out of Disney this last year was disappointing. Even though when I reviewed Indiana Jones, for instance, I liked it at the time. The more I've reflected on it, the more I was just, they took all that was great and good about Indiana Jones and exciting, even his brushness, and they just kind of messed with it in a way they didn't have to do. So I was disappointed with that. A lot of the Marvel films just felt checked in, and it's not just some of the special effects like in Quantumania. It was just in general. Now, again, talking about Disney could be a whole video on itself. I do have opinions, and we could talk about them. But overall, I think just in general, if I had to talk about what films were disappointing, that would be it. So those are my picks for best films of last year. There were a lot that I didn't talk about that I really did enjoy. There were a lot of films that didn't come out in theaters that I really enjoyed. Right after I watched Gran Turismo, for instance, I watched the film Ford versus Ferrari. Ford versus Ferrari. In fact, I watched that one probably 3 times this year. I enjoyed it so much. But that's not on the list because it didn't come out this last year, and but anyway, those are my picks for top films for this last year. Tell me what you think. Do you agree with my picks? Do you think there's something that I missed? Is there a film on my list of that I reviewed that you said, "Hey, why didn't you talk about this one? You were so excited about it. Did you just forget?" I also didn't talk about films like Jesus Revolution, which I did see and I did enjoy. I especially liked the realistic portrayal of human flawed people who are still in ministry. They still have to deal with all of those issues, and yet still God does incredible things. There's no doubt. I mean, even you just look at the title of our channel, this, that, and theology. I'm going to approach things from a particular worldview, and I did enjoy that film, but I didn't necessarily think it was best on this list. And I also try not to take too many pot shots and reviews of Christian filmmakers. They have a hard enough time as it is. So that for better or worse, that's where we're at. Next up, as we're talking, moving on to our next area, that's the question of what is Zach playing this week? I love video games. I won't be ashamed of that. And I really had some fun this week with a couple of video games. The biggest one is the new demo for Final Fantasy VII. I remember back when I was a teenager in the mid 90s, I saw the first trailer for Fantasy VII in a movie theater. And that's the point when I think for a lot of people, especially if you're a big fan of the Final Fantasy series, you look at these games as massive storytelling opportunities, and they really do. They try to focus on storytelling more than anything else. Last year we had Final Fantasy 16, which was absolutely story driven in all that it was doing. And so Monday there was this PlayStation State of Play where they showcased some of the new features, and they said, "Yeah, and we're dropping a demo." I downloaded it right then, and I was itching to play the demo, and I finally got to play that actually Wednesday night. And it's a scene from right after the first remake game is done, where they're doing the flashback. If you haven't played it, or if you're unfamiliar with Final Fantasy VII, I won't try to wrap you in there, but really excited about this game coming out at the end of the month. And I know that I'm going to be sinking probably too many hours into playing it, but it was a lot of fun. Before the demo dropped, what I have been playing is a game called Hard Space Shipbreaker, and this is not story driven at all. I mean, there is some story in the game, but it's really just told through radio conversations that you overhear as you're kind of looking at things. And basically all you're doing is in your zero G, and you float through space and you break spaceships apart, and you're kind of a salvage person. But I've been playing this one pretty much with the sound off as I've been listening to podcasts. There's been a lot of podcast sermon streams. I've been kind of hyper focused on one issue of two systems of theology and trying to compare the two. And this has been not a brainless game to play while you're doing that, but something that is something to keep my mind occupied while I'm also listening and kind of doing this and something else. And since it's free on if you're a PlayStation Plus member, it was a kind of a no brainer, and I've really enjoyed been doing some of that. I did mention earlier that there are some things that are coming up next. I am not actually watching a whole lot of things right now. I've been doing a lot of listening to things and watching YouTube videos. Um, Coming up next is going to be a couple movie reviews. If you're staying to the channel, we are going to record some new movies, and they're actually not new movies, but they're actually movies that are being released into theaters for the first time. Disney Pixar's Soul came out in streaming. All three of these came out during COVID, and they didn't get theatrical release. They're all Pixar films. They were all very fully developed films. They're very much Pixar, but they missed the theater experience to see them. Disney's Soul came out in January in theaters. This month, Turning Red will be in theaters, and next month is Luca. And so we will have reviews of all three of those films within a week or so of their release. Obviously, we're a little behind on Soul because we did take January off, but you can look forward to hearing reviews on the worldview implications of all of those. Soul, in particular, is interesting because we are talking about areas that move into theological views. And so when we talk about worldviews of what it means to be human, what it is to have a soul, it's worth seeing that. Turning Red caused no small amount of controversy when it was released, especially as it dealt with issues of what it meant to be become a girl. But my biggest concerns in all of those weren't about the conversations that you don't often have in public, but it has a lot to do with identity and whether or not we can choose our own identity. And of course, Luca is a fantastic film about friendship. It's one of the family favorites here when it came out. Well, thank you for sticking around for our very first live stream. Again, we're planning on doing this again next week at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. So that is 11 o'clock if you're in the Central, noon on East Coast. And if you are on the West Coast, that'll be at around, I guess that's 9 o'clock. I can do math occasionally. I'm glad you've been able to join me and spend this time together as we've talked about things. If there's a topic you're interested in, go ahead and leave that in the comments below. I will be looking at them. I'm happy to see if there's something. Hey, we should talk about this in this coming week. We'll also talk about news events if there's something particularly worthy. But till then, thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next time right here on This, That, and Theology Live. I hope you have a fantastic day, and we will see you next week.